Okay, so I just kind of wanted to walk through one more option with Google Drawings. And I've touched briefly on this in another video of creating a template, but I really wanted to kind of walk through a little bit more of that and how this could be used for like PDFs and other things. So a lot of times, in history or in a geography class, we might be labeling maps. Potentially you're using this in other classes to label like diagrams, maybe in science class, like the anatomy of a cell or something along those lines, right? And typically this would have been something you printed and handed out to students, would have been set up really nice and easy for them to go ahead and fill in where are these things on here. And so there's a couple different options to kind of transform that into a digital assignment. One being a Google slide. So you could put this on a Google slide. Students can then come in here and they can, insert, I'm on a view only version, but they can insert text boxes and really edit this and provide some labeling. So that is that is a great way of doing this digitally that really will work for students and kind of puts that on them to label and to do this correctly. So that is one option, is using the Google Slides. I really am a fan of Google Drawings and find that like the ease that students can use there is pretty helpful. It also is maybe a little bit more scaffolded, so it provides a few more kind of steps and supports for students if they're really struggling with, especially some of this technology piece of figuring out how to insert things on a Google slide. So I've kind of taken this assignment here with this map, and there's also a set of instructions to go over sort of how to label this map and all of that. I've kind of taken that and turned it into this Google Drive. And so this is sort of what I will be going over with you and kind of showing you as we move through this. So hopefully this video isn't too long, but I am going to try to take you through all the steps of kind of converting that, probably something that used to be just a printed assignment, into this Google Drawing assignment. So luckily that original assignment included just an image, and I was able to very easily copy and paste that image on here, but maybe your original assignment is a PDF and you can't find that same image on Google image search or anything like that. So a great way to insert that image on here would be to take a screenshot of your PDF. And you can do that, like I'm on a Mac right now, so it's Command-Shift-4 allows me to just select only the piece that I want to select, like this on the computer, and I've got a screenshot of it. If you're using your desktop at school, then using the snipping tool, which can be found in the little Windows button in the bottom left, and you can open the snipping tool. You can do the same thing there. And I'll also upload a video about how to do that from Chromebook, just in case you aren't sure how to screenshot. But once I've screenshotted, I can then add my image to my Google Drive. So that's what I've done here, and this is my base image. This is what I want students to be labeling. And so I've kind of created essentially like a word bank almost for students. And if you were to label, like maybe it's a diagram for science or something like that, putting together a word bank might be helpful. You want them to label these certain parts. And so that's sort of what I've done here, and I'll walk you through that because this, I think, is probably the piece that might take the longest, or a piece that we might not be so familiar with. So once my main image is here, the image that I want them to label, on this side, I was able to stretch out my Google Drawing by moving this little piece in the corner here. You can change the size of your Google Drawing that way. So I was able to stretch this out. So on this side, I could put instructions and have my, like little drag and drop squares. So I've done that with all my instructions. And to do that, I've just inserted a text box. So all of this, you can see, is in this large text box here. And I've done that just by clicking this little T in the square. That is a text box. If I click on it, I can then put a text box wherever I would like it to go. So now I have this new text box over here if I wanted to add some details. So I set up this text box and I just put in the instructions. What I would have had on this printed handout for students, I've now put here. And so they're labeling this blank map here. They can use still this completed map to help them to get all of these pieces in the right spot. But I want them labeling multiple different things on this map. It's going to have a lot of layers. Now, instead of, kind of having them put their own text box in or draw things like that, I decided to create drag and drop so they can literally click on, here's the UK is over here, and I just have to drag and drop, I deleted France for some reason. They just have to drag and drop their label to the correct place, right? So that's just what they would, that's how they would be doing that. And so they can move all of those around and kind of take them back and forth. That's just a really simple way, interactive way to make it kind of easy for them to be labeling parts of this. So I like to use these. Well, now how do I create these? Great question. Creating them is actually pretty simple. So again, I'm going to go up to my little toolbar here, and right next to the text box on the left of it is a thing called shape. It's got the circle and the square. I would click the shape that I would like. I'm just using basic squares for this one. There's lots of shapes available. And I'll put approximately the size I want this to be, and I'll just directly start typing in it and say, okay, you're labeling the United Kingdom. I can, change my font just as I normally would up here. If I want it to be bolded or anything like that, I can change the font. I can also change the color, and you notice I've kind of color coded my labels here, and so I can change that by going to this fill color up at the top, and I can pick whatever color I would like this to be and change the colors there. So that way I've just created this, and now this is like fully connected. This I just get to drag it around and move here, and it works just fine. Now let's say I need to create, 5 more of these. I don't want to go insert shape and redo the whole thing. I want it to kind of be set up like this. So I'm actually just going to copy, right? Control C or Control C there, Control V to paste it. And now I've got this new box, all brand new, and I can still go in and put, a different name on it. And now I've got multiples here. So that way, if you are labeling some kind of diagram, maybe creating a word box for students, great way to do that. And you're just creating these shapes here that students can then drag and drop onto their diagram. Students could also do this. So if you want to give them, essentially instructions like this, but without the drag and drop piece, students could create, they can go and insert the shape where they think that shape belongs. Right? If I want them to label here and they just want them to be like, yeah, that's France. They can do that on their own. You could also set this up of like, oh, you need to be naming these countries, and I'll just draw a line like you should write the name of the country there. Students could come in and insert just a text box over that line, and now they've labeled that space. So if you did have a diagram and you just wanted them to label like that, that could always be an option too. If there's not enough space, like, if the country's smaller than France, you can also have an arrow and say, okay, I need you to label this country. What country is that? And they could either, they could drag and drop. Oops, I always forget that you have to change that. They can drag and drop, or if you don't want to provide them with the drag and drop, they could insert, again, their own text box into that space and label it right there. Okay, so there's lots of options here with Google Drawing. And I just find the ability to layer these things really helpful. The fact that you can have the image underneath here and just drag and drop onto it, I think is pretty helpful. So play around with Google Drawing, play around with this toolbar. There's lots of great stuff here to investigate and to see how could we do this. But this is one way to kind of get students labeling a map or labeling a diagram or something along those lines. I found that it has worked pretty well for students, and having this kind of extra support is helpful. I also felt, for this assignment, this is pretty simple. So this is the actual finished product of how this goes out to students. It's some instructions. They have their blank map. This will automatically make their own copy for them, but it's what I just showed you there. They also have the completed map, so they can pull from this to complete that blank map. And then I really wanted them to kind of reflect on, well, what is this map telling us? How does this geography important? So I just created some reflection questions here. So that is that final assignment for them. One way of converting, PDFs or some kind of handout to a more digital format. Thanks for bearing with me through this long video. If you have more specific questions about how to set any of these things up or anything like that, please feel free to reach out or look at some of the other videos. I go into a little bit more sharing and collaborating on Google Docs in other videos on here. So that's also available to you.